Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today I wanted to do the Should You Buy video on the new RSI Polaris Corvette. Now, I gave you some information the other day regarding the ship when we got our first look on it, but since then we've gotten a full brochure and a presentation to add some more information to it, as well as it giving me just a little bit of time to spend thinking through all of the different options that have to do with the ship. Now, before we get started, it is worth pointing out that in the not uncommon problem at all, the stats page on the brochure has some conflicting areas, so we won't really know what the specifications are for a while, but we'll end up covering what we can in this video today. The Polaris is a Corvette-class ship designed to replace the role that the Idris left behind when it got bigger, but it's doing it in a much different way. Where the Idris was initially going to rely on the railgun and a fighter contingent on board, the Polaris is really focusing on speed and firepower to get that job done, almost in a way that's kind of like a hybrid between a large multi-crew ship and a capital ship. The Polaris comes in at 155 meters if you believe the brochure, which I personally do, even though the often misprinted stats page shows the ship at 130 meters. Now, it does have the ability to carry 216 SEU of cargo, but I wouldn't even really look at that in all too serious of a light unless you plan on using this as sort of an overflow for your transport operations, or potentially as a pirate capital ship with the ability to haul some of the goods you scared out of your poor target's cargo hold. But for the most part, this is a ship that's really designed to conduct war, and because of that, it's really fairly, minimal importance to talk about the cargo space. The ship has 3 large shields powered by one capital class power plant, and with the reoccurring theme in the documents about speed, it sounds like it's really going to rely mostly on strike runs and shield strength to stay alive compared to having a massive amount of armor. Keeping lower or lighter armor also helps to kind of balance the ship out and keeps it in line with it being able to be fast. The Polaris has 2 main thrusters and 4 auxiliary thrusters. Now, that's a little bit weird, but I think the most likely reasoning behind this is that the aux thrusters are probably drastically increasing your fuel consumption. So it's to be used on attack runs or while getting up to speed in cruise to not let anybody get away from you being able to capture them. But in most normal situations, the auxiliary thrusters aren't being used, but we'll end up having to see. Now, on board, you're going to have a max crew size of 24 people, which I think was bigger than all of us kind of expected to see. And when we tally up the known crew stations, we have 5 man turrets, which is going to be 2 on the top, sort of in the middle in front of the hangar. We've got 2 on the sides of the ship, and then 1 on the top back of the ship. Plus 5 people working in the bridge, being a captain, an auto turret operator, a comms officer, a pilot, and a co-pilot. So that right there is going to be 10 spots that are being used. Now, past that, we can assume that we have a pilot or 2 for the hangar ship, not to mention probably an onboard hangar room operator, so that kind of gives us another 3 spots. Now, there's probably going to be a handful of people that are working in engineering and running around to make repairs on the ship. So my guess is that the ship is really capable of carrying a contingent of Marines as well for boarding actions using something like an Argo, maybe a Redeemer if it ends up fitting. The Vanguard looks like it's going to be a tight fit if it fits at all. But some sort of vessel that's able to actually carry people that can fit in the hangar would be a really good option as far as moving troops onto another ship from your ship. And that kind of makes sense as far as that max crew size of 24. Now, weaponry on the Polaris is sort of a wild card that I'm hoping that we end up getting some more information on in the Q&As that they're going to do. And typically we end up seeing question and answer posts done on the Wednesday and Friday following the sale. Now, first off, the 5 man turrets, there's actually going to be 6 that are listed on the stats page, but I can't count that many on the models or the brochure. So I'm going to assume that we have 5 man turrets until I see otherwise. Now, the stats page has them listed as size 4. And that could end up meaning like what we saw with the Terrapin Chin turret, where it would say that it's a size 5 turret, and we actually saw 2 by size 1s. So in that situation, we would actually see 2 by size 1s on these turrets, which would seem really, really low for a capital ship. Or it means 2 by size 4 weapons, which is more of what we would expect to see. Now, it's possible that we see something in the middle, like 2 by size 3 weapons as well, but either way, anything below size 3 would be a major disappointment on this ship, since it's so focused on the turrets for softening up bigger targets. Now, there's also going to be 2 auto turrets, one on the chin with size 5 listed, and one on the rear with size 4 listed. And again, I'm assuming those are going to be weapon sizes and not mount sizes, but we'll need to get some clarification during the Q&A. Now, there are 2 other locations, one on top and one on bottom, that are listed as size 3 missile batteries, which are especially useful in dealing with a swarm of fighters that are coming to attack your ship. Now, I really like that the auto turrets are operated by a person, and what I'm hoping that we end up seeing here is more of a skill-based position where targeting multiple ships or potentially even things like incoming torpedoes is a real challenge, but is possible. The main teeth on this ship is a contingent of 28 torpedoes that are listed as size 6, that are going to be launched in volleys of 4 from the front of the ship. Now, they should be able to pack a serious punch, and even though they come with a severe cost most likely, they're going to be one of the keys to this ship being able to take on much bigger targets. Now, the way I sort of envision the ship being flown is to use the speed to create fast attack runs that are going to be capable of using the large turreted weapons to soften up the shields of larger targets, and making as many runs necessary to unload your torpedo payload. And when you've got 28 on board, you have plenty of chances to do that. Now, I'm sure you can end up launching torpedoes at a shielded target, but my guess is that their effectiveness is going to be significantly diminished, meaning working well with your gunners is going to be really important on a ship like this. You know, like today, for example, when you shoot a missile at a target that's got full shields, you kind of hit the shields and you notice their ship get knocked around a little bit. I'm assuming torpedoes are going to follow a similar mechanic, meaning your gunners are going to have to help kind of melt the shields so your torpedoes can actually be effective. Now, there's an area that I'm not sure about on the stats page where they mention 3 size 10 pylon mounts. Now, that could be torpedoes and just listed incorrectly, or it may be other things like sensor arrays or fuel tanks, or really who knows what. But that's going to need to be addressed because the size 10 mount is massive. Now, I think the people who may want to seriously consider this ship is actually probably a fairly small audience. As I've highlighted in my capital ship problem video, there's a lot of prestige to flying around a capital ship, but they're serious ships that are purpose-built with war in mind. It's overkill for things like bounty hunting, and unless you're escorting much bigger fleets with bigger payout possibilities, the earning potential is going to not really be there on a ship like this. Now, sure, you could possibly take on missions from, systems that need cap ship coverage or maybe contract work from the UEE, but it's a warbird, and, you're more than likely not going to be using it to earn much more money than actually just having fun or using it to protect your organization's reputation, like those types of things. They've talked about scalability, so there should be a way to make money using this ship, but it's hard to say that it's going to be there as compared to something like a transport operation. That being said, if you're in an organization looking for a flagship and you're unable to acquire an Idris or a Javelin, then the Polaris is a really nice option that could potentially give you some flexibility in the missions that you can take on, or let you go toe-to-toe with some of the bigger organizations with similar fleets. Now, I think for those of you who are interested in working in a very dangerous areas of space, or maybe potentially waging war against enemies like the Vandal, helping to keep the Scourge at bay, the Polaris gives you the firepower to engage bigger turrets, or bigger targets. You've got the turret coverage to help with smaller targets, and that hangar on board to repair and refuel the ships that are actually in your fleet while you're away from more conventional bases. Now, for those of you who want the cap ship experience but aren't crazy about the crew requirements in like the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, or a ship that's going to be capable of handling more like the ships that you're familiar with versus something like the Idris where you have to set a course, then all of a sudden the Polaris is a really nice middle ground with some of the capital ship benefits, but some of the conventional aspects of the ships you're more familiar with flying. Now, if you run a pirate organization, something like the Polaris can carry a bit of cargo. It has a hangar that you may end up being able to hold a cutlass in, and can probably support a wing of buccaneers as far as repairs and refuel goes. And all of a sudden, the ship becomes a really interesting mobile piracy base that's going to allow you to scare the cargo right out of your prey and keep your fleet at max operating potential, doing as much damage as possible. Now, there's also a lot to like about the Polaris, but based on the crew size, the operating cost, and the high cost of weaponry like torpedoes and missiles, you really need to make sure that you have other vehicles available. The Polaris may be the biggest, baddest, most powerful ship in your arsenal, but it's most likely not going to be your most flown ship. Nobody should be owning only a Polaris, and you need ships of industry or ones that are going to be capable of being flown solo, really, so keep that in mind when you make your buying decision. Now, I'm going to be covering this ship in a lot more detail once we get some very much needed Q&A from the development team. But in the meantime, I would say that for the right people, the ship is a very cool design and has a lot of value. But there are way more unanswered questions right now than we typically have in these releases. So I would say if you're willing to buy, make sure you're willing to adjust your expectations on the ship, or at least ready to melt it, because it could go a lot of different ways depending on what is to come and how the developers answer questions about the ship. Now, I'll say that right now there is one of these in my fleet, but I'm anxiously awaiting more information to determine its future in my fleet. So if you have questions about any of this, please let me know, or if there's things that kind of sold you on the ship, toss those in the comments as well. Probably on Wednesday and Friday, or somewhere right around there, I'll have follow-up videos regarding the information that we get. But hopefully that helps provide you guys with a little more information about where we stand today. And I apologize for a lot of the we'll have to wait and see, because that's just kind of the information that we have today. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you have questions. Have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.